My name is Sophia Martinez, and I'm 25 years old. What happened in that conference room last Thursday is something my father will never forget for the rest of his life. Picture this. My father walking into what he thought was a routine business meeting, adjusting his tie and preparing his usual confident presentation, only to freeze completely when he saw who was sitting at the head of the boardroom table. The same daughter he'd humiliated at graduation just 1 year earlier, telling everyone within earshot that I'd never amount to anything and was destined to be a disappointment. But there I sat, in a $3,000 suit, holding the contract's tea. Hat would determine whether his company survived the next 6 months. You see, that moment when our eyes met across that mahogany table wasn't just awkward. It was the culmination of 12 months of the most intense business building I'd ever experienced. While he'd been telling relatives I was wasting my life, I'd been quietly acquiring the one thing his company desperately needed to stay afloat. And the look on his face when he realized his failure daughter now controlled his professional fate? Priceless doesn't even begin to describe it. Before we dive into this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy stories about underestimated people getting the ultimate revenge through pure success. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love connecting with people who understand that sometimes the best way to prove someone wrong is to let your achievements do the talking. Let me take you back to my college graduation day, May 15th, exactly 13 months ago. I was graduating summa cum laude with a double major in computer science and business administration from Stanford University. Not just any graduate, I was valedictorian of my class, the youngest student in my program's history to complete both degrees simultaneously, and I'd already received 3 job offers from major tech companies. But you wouldn't have known any of that from how my father acted that day. "Sophia, there you are," Dad said when he spotted me after the ceremony, his voice carrying that familiar tone of disappointment I'd grown up hearing. He was talking to his brother, my Uncle Miguel, and hadn't noticed I was close enough to hear their conversation. "I just don't understand what she's thinking," he continued, adjusting his tie in that nervous way he did when he was about to criticize someone. 4 years at Stanford, all that money we spent, and for what? She's talking about starting some tech company instead of getting a real job. "Tech companies can be very successful," Uncle Miguel said diplomatically. "Not the way Sophia does things," Dad replied with a bitter laugh. "She's always been a dreamer, never practical. Always thinks she's smarter than everyone else. Trust me. She's going to fail spectacularly, and then she'll come crying back to us asking for money." I stood there in my graduation gown, diploma still warm in my hands, listening to my father predict my failure to anyone who would listen. The worst part wasn't the criticism. It was the certainty in his voice, like my failure was already a foregone conclusion. "Richard, she just graduated with honors," my mother said, finally joining the conversation. "Maybe we should support her dreams." "Dreams don't pay bills, Carmen," Dad snapped. "She needs to grow up and face reality. This tech startup nonsense is just another one of her impractical ideas. Mark my words, within a year, she'll be begging for a regular job, and we'll be the ones who have to bail her out financially." That's when he noticed me standing there. Instead of being embarrassed that I'd overheard him trashing my future, he doubled down. "There's our graduate," he said with fake enthusiasm. "We were just talking about your plans." The pause before plans was loaded with skepticism. "I know what you were saying, Dad. Then you know I'm just trying to be realistic. Starting a business is risky, especially for someone with no experience. You should take one of those job offers and build some credibility first." "The business plan is solid," I said quietly. "I've already secured initial funding and identified a market gap that..." "Sophia, enough with the business school buzzwords," he interrupted. "In the real world, 90% of startups fail. You're being naive if you think you're going to be the exception." Uncle Miguel shifted uncomfortably. A few relatives had gathered nearby, drawn by the tension in Dad's voice. This was supposed to be my celebration day, and it was turning into a public lecture about my impending failure. "I'm not naive, Dad. I'm prepared. You're 24 years old with no real-world experience. You think some college classes make you ready to run a business?" He was getting louder now, attracting more attention. "Let me tell you something about the real world. It doesn't care how smart you think you are. It eats up dreamers like you and spits them out." "Oh, Richard," Mom warned. But he wasn't finished. "She's going to fail," he announced to our growing audience of family members, spectacularly. "And in a year, when reality hits and this fantasy company collapses, she'll realize that her old dad was right all along. The humiliation was complete. My graduation day, what should have been a celebration of 4 years of academic excellence, had become a public prediction of my professional doom. Relatives nodded sympathetically at Dad, as if I weren't standing right there. A few cousins exchanged knowing looks, poor Sophia, always reaching for things beyond her grasp. I hope I'm wrong, Dad concluded, though his tone suggested he was absolutely certain he wasn't. But mark my words, she'll never be successful with this attitude. She needs to learn humility before life teaches it to her the hard way. I left that graduation party early, driving home alone while my family continued celebrating without me. But instead of crying or feeling defeated, I felt something else entirely: motivation. Pure, crystallized determination to prove him so wrong that he'd never doubt me again. The next morning, I turned down all 3 corporate job offers and put everything into building my company. Not because I was stubborn or naive, but because I knew something my father didn't. The market gap I'd identified wasn't theoretical. It was a massive opportunity in cybersecurity that could revolutionize how small businesses protect their data. If you've ever had a parent predict your failure in front of your entire family, type "prove them wrong" in the comments. What comes next is going to show you exactly how sweet revenge can be when it's served in a boardroom. The 12 months following graduation were the hardest and most focused of my life. While Dad continued telling relatives about my impractical dreams at every family gathering, I was building something extraordinary. I rented a small office space, hired 3 brilliant developers I'd known from Stanford, and threw myself into 16-hour days developing our cybersecurity platform. The first 6 months were brutal. We lived on ramen noodles and coffee, working around the clock to develop a product that could compete with established companies that had $100 million budgets. There were nights I slept on the office couch, mornings I woke up with code still running through my head, weekends that blended into weekdays until time became meaningless. But I had something those established companies didn't: hunger. And the memory of my father's voice predicting my failure drove me through every obstacle, every setback, every moment when quitting would have been easier. By month 8, we had a working prototype. By month 10, we'd secured our first major client, a regional bank that needed exactly what we were offering. By month 12, we had 15 employees, and were processing security for over 200 small businesses across 3 states. But the real breakthrough came when I received a call from Marcus Chen, the CEO of Dataflow Solutions, one of the largest cybersecurity firms on the West Coast. "Ms. Martinez," he said during our phone conversation, "we've been watching your company's growth with great interest. Your platform is exactly what the market needs, and frankly, you're solving problems we've been struggling with for years." "Thank you, Mr. Chen. That's very encouraging to hear. I'd like to make you an acquisition offer. We want to buy your company and bring you on as a division head. The offer is $12 million, plus stock options and a guaranteed leadership position." $12 million. For a company I'd started with $50,000 and a dream that my father had publicly dismissed as naive fantasy. "That's a generous offer," I said carefully. "But I'm not interested in selling. May I ask why?" "This would make you financially secure for life, because I'm not building this company to sell it. I'm building it to run it. And I think my platform can be worth much more than $12 if I keep growing it independently." There was a pause. "Ms. Martinez, with respect, you're very young to be turning down this kind of security. The market can be unpredictable." "Mr. Chen, with respect, I didn't build this company to play it safe. I built it to revolutionize cybersecurity for small businesses. And I'm just getting started." But Marcus Chen wasn't done with me. 3 weeks later, he called again with a different proposition. "Ms. Martinez, I have an unusual request. Dataflow has been struggling to secure a contract with a mid-sized manufacturing company. They need exactly the kind of targeted security solutions you've developed. Would you be interested in a partnership deal where you'd provide the technical solution and we'd handle the client management?" "What kind of company?" I asked, though something in my gut was already telling me this conversation was heading somewhere significant. "Martinez Manufacturing. They're a family-owned business that's been around for 30 years. Good reputation, solid financials, but they've had some cybersecurity issues recently that have their insurance company demanding upgrades." Martinez Manufacturing. The company my father had built from nothing. the source of all his pride and confidence. The business that had funded my Stanford education and given him the platform to lecture me about real-world experience. Mr. Chen, I said slowly, I think I'd be very interested in that partnership. The irony was perfect. Dad's company needed cybersecurity solutions. I had the best cybersecurity platform in the region. And he had no idea that his failure daughter was about to become his only hope of keeping his business insured and operational. 2 weeks later, Marcus Chen called to schedule the presentation meeting. They want to see the technical specifications and meet with the development team, he explained. Standard stuff for a contract this size. When and where? Next out. Thursday, 2 p.m. at their headquarters. The CEO will be there along with his management team. This could be a $2 million contract if we nail the presentation. $2 $2 from the man who'd told everyone I'd never be successful. I spent the next week preparing the most comprehensive presentation of my career. Every technical detail perfect, every financial projection bulletproof, every security protocol designed specifically for manufacturing companies like Dad's. This wasn't just about winning a contract, it was about proving that his naive daughter had built something he desperately needed. Thursday arrived with unusual spring weather, sunny and clear, the kind of day that feels like a good omen. I dressed carefully in my best suit, a charcoal gray ensemble. That screamed serious businesswoman. My team looked professional and confident as we loaded our presentation materials into the car. Martinez Manufacturing's headquarters looked exactly the same as it had when I was a child visiting Dad's office. Same brick building, same logo, same reception area where I'd once done homework while waiting for him to finish meetings. But I wasn't that little girl anymore, and I wasn't there as his daughter. I was there as the CEO of the company that could save his business. The receptionist directed us to conference room A, the same room where Dad held his most important meetings. Marcus Chen was already there, setting up his materials and chatting with my father's assistant about logistics. Sophia, perfect timing, Marcus said when I walked in. They should be here any minute. I took my seat at the head of the conference table, not because I was being presumptuous, but because Marcus had specifically requested that I lead the technical portion of the presentation. The irony of where I was sitting didn't escape me. At exactly 2 p.m., I heard voices in the hallway. Dad's voice, specifically, talking to someone about quarterly projections and insurance requirements. The door opened, and his operations manager walked in first, followed by his financial advisor. And then my father walked through that doorway, mid-conversation, not yet looking at the room's occupants. The insurance company was very clear about the timeline he was saying. We need to have these security upgrades in place within 60 days, or they'll cancel our policy, and without insurance. That's when he looked up and saw me sitting at the head of his conference table. The words died in his throat. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, shock, and something that looked almost like fear. For a full 10 seconds he just stood there staring at me while his brain processed what he was seeing. Dad, I said calmly, standing up and extending my hand for a professional handshake. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. He mechanically shook my hand, still looking like he'd seen a ghost. Sophia, what are you doing here? I'm here to present my company's cybersecurity solutions for Martinez Manufacturing. I believe you have an urgent need for upgraded security protocols. His operations manager looked between us, confused by the obvious personal connection. Marcus Chen jumped in smoothly. Mr. Martinez, I believe you know Sophia Martinez, CEO of Securicor Solutions. She's developed exactly the kind of targeted cybersecurity platform your company needs. CEO? Dad repeated as if the word didn't make sense. That's right, I said, returning to my seat at the head of the table. Shall we begin the presentation? I understand you're working under a tight timeline with your insurance requirements. The next hour was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. I presented my company's capabilities while my father sat in stunned silence, watching his failure daughter demonstrate expertise in areas he'd never even known existed. My team walked through technical specifications that solved problems he hadn't even realized his company had. I fielded questions from his staff with the kind of confidence that only comes from truly knowing your subject matter. The implementation timeline would be 6 weeks, I concluded, well within your insurance company's requirements. And our ongoing monitoring service ensures that you'll never face this kind of compliance crisis again. His financial advisor was the first to speak. This is exactly what we need. The approach is comprehensive. The timeline works, and frankly, the cost is less than what the other firms quoted us. When could you start? His operations manager asked. Immediately, I said. We can have a team on site Monday morning to begin the assessment phase. Dad finally found his voice. Sophia, can we talk privately for a moment? I looked at Marcus, who nodded. We'll step out and let you folks discuss the proposal. Once we were alone, Dad sat heavily in his chair and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. I don't understand, he said quietly. Last year you were talking about some startup idea, and now you're running a cybersecurity company that can solve my problems? The same startup idea you said would fail spectacularly, I reminded him. The same impractical dream you publicly predicted would collapse within a year. He winced. Sophia, about graduation day. You were absolutely certain I'd never be successful. You told our entire family that I was naive and destined to fail. You said I needed to learn humility before life taught it to me the hard way. I was trying to protect you from disappointment. No, Dad. You were protecting yourself from the possibility that your daughter might succeed in ways you couldn't understand or control. The silence stretched between us. Finally, he asked, how successful are you? Successful enough that your company's $2 billion contract represents about 8% of my annual revenue. Successful enough that I turned down a $12 million acquisition offer because I knew I could build something bigger. Successful enough that the daughter you called a failure is now your best hope of keeping your business insured. His face went pale. $12 million? Someone offered to buy your company for $12 million? 3 months ago. I said no because I'm not building this to sell. I'm building it to run. And you're willing to work with us? After what I said? I leaned back in my chair, looking at this man who'd shaped so much of my motivation through his doubt. Dad, I'm here because it's a good business opportunity. Your company needs what mine provides, and you're willing to pay fair market value for it. The fact that it proves every single one of your predictions wrong is just a bonus. He was quiet for a long moment. You've changed. No, Dad. I've become exactly who I always was. You just never took the time to see it. When Marcus and the others returned, the contract negotiation was swift and professional. Dad's team was desperate for a solution, and mine was the best option available. We shook hands on a 2-year deal worth $2.10 million, with options for expansion into other security services. As we packed up our presentation materials, Dad approached me one more time. Sophia, I owe you an apology. Not just for graduation day but for never believing in you the way I should have. Apology accepted, I said simply. But Dad, this isn't about our relationship. This is about your business surviving and mine growing. Let's keep it professional. He nodded, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Will I see you at family gatherings now that you're back in town for this contract? That depends, I said, closing my briefcase with a decisive click. Are you going to introduce me as your successful entrepreneur daughter, or as the dreamer who got lucky? The question hung in the air as I walked out of the conference room, leaving him to consider what had just happened. The Martinez manufacturing contract became the foundation for Securacor's expansion into the industrial sector. Within 6 months, we'd secured 12 additional manufacturing clients, hired 30 new employees, and moved to a headquarters 3 times the size of our original office. Dad's company not only met their insurance requirements, they became one of the most secure manufacturing facilities in the state. The implementation was so successful that his insurance premiums actually decreased, saving him more money annually than our services cost. But the real change was in how my family treated me. The relatives who'd witnessed Dad's graduation day predictions suddenly wanted to hear all about my overnight success. Uncle Miguel, who'd tried to defend me that day, made a point of telling everyone about his brilliant niece who'd revolutionized cybersecurity. And Dad? Dad started introducing me differently at family events. This is my daughter Sophia, he'd say with obvious pride. She's the CEO of the cybersecurity company that saved my business. Smartest person I know. The transformation wasn't immediate or dramatic. It was gradual, like watching someone slowly realize they'd been wrong about something fundamental. But it was genuine. 8 months after that conference room meeting, Dad called me with a proposition that surprised us both. Sophia, I've been thinking about expansion, maybe acquiring some smaller manufacturing companies. But I don't want to make the same mistakes I've made before. What kind of mistakes? The mistake of thinking I know everything. The mistake of not listening to people who might see opportunities I miss. The mistake of what? Not recognizing talent, especially when it's right in front of me. He paused, and I could hear him gathering courage for what came next. I want to offer you a position on Martinez Manufacturing's board of directors. Not because you're my daughter, but because you're exactly the kind of strategic thinker this company needs to grow. A year and a half after predicting my spectacular failure, my father was asking me to help guide his company's future. I'll consider it, I told him. Send me the proposal and I'll review it with my team. Your team? Dad, I'm the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I don't make major decisions without consulting my advisors, of course. I should have realized. Sophia, you've built something incredible. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. The board position led to consulting work with other family businesses, which led to speaking engagements about cybersecurity for small and medium enterprises, which led to a feature article in Forbes. It's about young CEOs revolutionizing traditional industries. But the moment that felt like the ultimate vindication came a full 2 years after graduation, at my cousin Maria's wedding. I was talking to a group of relatives about Securicor's latest expansion, when I overheard Dad talking to his brother-in-law about his business. The cybersecurity upgrades have been incredible, he was saying. My daughter Sophia's company implemented everything. She's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I always knew she'd be successful, even when she was young. You could just tell she had that entrepreneurial spirit. I almost laughed out loud. He'd rewritten history so completely that he now remembered being supportive of my dreams from the beginning. But I didn't correct him. Sometimes people need to revise their narratives to live with their past mistakes, and I'd gotten everything I needed from our professional relationship. The success of Securicor continued to accelerate. By year 3, we had 150 employees across 4 offices, annual revenue of $47, and clients in 12 states. The company that Dad had predicted would fail within a year was now being courted by venture capital firms offering valuations in excess of $200 million. But I still wasn't interested in selling. Not because I was stubborn or sentimental, but because I was building something that mattered. A company that protected small businesses from cyber threats they couldn't handle alone. Every client we secured, every attack we prevented, every business we helped protect, felt like a validation of the vision Dad had called naive. The most satisfying client meeting of all came 3 years after that first conference room encounter. Dad had referred another manufacturing company to us, and during the presentation, he introduced me to their CEO. "This is Sophia Martinez," he said with unmistakable pride. "She's the founder and CEO of Securicor Solutions, the best cybersecurity firm in the region. She also happens to be my daughter, though she's successful enough that she doesn't need that connection." After the meeting, as we walked to our cars, Dad pulled me aside. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about graduation day a lot lately. Oh, I said some terrible things. Things that must have hurt you deeply. They did hurt Dad. But they also motivated me. I'm glad something good came from my stupidity. But Sophia, I need you to know, I was wrong about everything. You weren't naive or impractical. You weren't destined to fail. You saw opportunities I couldn't even imagine, and you had the courage to pursue them when everyone, including me, told you to play it safe. I know, Dad. Do you forgive me? Not just for graduation day, but for all the years I didn't see who you really were." I looked at this man who'd unintentionally given me the greatest gift of my career, doubt to overcome and expectations to exceed. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said. "But more importantly, I used your doubt as fuel to build something extraordinary. So in a weird way I should thank you." "How do you figure that?" "Because if you'd believed in me from the beginning I might not have felt the need to prove you so spectacularly wrong." He laughed, really laughed, for the first time in our adult relationship. "So, my failure as a supportive father accidentally made you more successful? Something like that?" "Well," he said, still chuckling, "I guess that's one way to take credit for your success." That conversation marked the real end of our old dynamic, and the beginning of a genuinely respectful relationship between two business owners who happen to be related. Today, Securicor Solutions employs 200 people and generates $73 in annual revenue. We've prevented over 10,000 cyber attacks, protected more than 2,000 small businesses, and been recognized as one of the fastest growing cybersecurity firms in the country. Dad's manufacturing company has thrived under our security protocols, expanded into 3 new markets, and become a case study in how proper cybersecurity can actually enable business growth rather than just prevent problems. And me? I'm 27 years old, running a company that's revolutionizing how small businesses think about digital security, speaking at conferences around the world, and serving on the boards of 5 companies that value my strategic input. Not bad for someone who was destined to fail. The lesson from that graduation day humiliation isn't about proving parents wrong or seeking revenge through success. It's about the power of taking other people's doubts and transforming them into your own determination. Dad's predictions of failure became my blueprint for success. His certainty that I'd never amount to anything became my motivation to amount to everything he couldn't imagine. His public dismissal of my dreams became private fuel for achieving them. Sometimes the people who hurt us most give us exactly what we need to succeed, not their support, but their doubt. Not their belief, but their skepticism. Not their encouragement, but their challenge. The daughter he said would never be successful became more successful than he'd ever imagined possible. And the moment he walked into that conference room and saw me sitting at the head of the table was worth every hour of doubt, every moment of humiliation, every prediction of failure he'd ever made. Because success, when it comes after being completely written off, doesn't just feel good, it feels like justice. What predictions of failure have motivated your success? What doubts have you transformed into determination? Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had someone predict your failure and used it as fuel to prove them wrong, you're not alone. Comment "prove them wrong" if you believe in turning doubt into determination. Share this story with someone who needs to know that other people's expectations don't have to become your limitations. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories about family dynamics, professional vindication, and the sweet satisfaction of exceeding everyone's expectations. I'd love to know, should parents be more supportive of their children's unconventional dreams, or is some skepticism healthy motivation? Let me know in the comments. Remember, their predictions don't have to become your reality. Build your success anyway, and let them discover who you really are when you're ready to reveal it.